The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the Columbus Dispatch newsroom as Sarah Mitchell stared at the manila folder that had been sitting on her desk for 3 days. Inside lay a single photograph and a handwritten letter that would change everything she thought she knew about institutional accountability in Ohio. "You've been staring at that thing like it's going to bite you," said Marcus Rivera, her editor, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. His weathered face showed the kind of concern that came from 20 years of watching reporters chase stories into dark places. "This letter," Sarah said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "It's from Elena Chun. Her son Tommy disappeared from Sacred Heart boarding school 2 years ago. She says the police won't investigate properly." Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk, his expression growing serious. "Sacred Heart, that's the Catholic school up in Millfield, right? Been around forever." "Since 1962, Sarah confirmed, pulling out the photograph. It showed a slight Asian boy with kind eyes and a nervous smile, wearing the dark blue uniform of Sacred Heart. Tommy Chun, 16 years old when he vanished in November 2009. His mother says he called her the night before, crying, saying something was wrong at the school. And then, nothing. The school reported him as a runaway the next morning. Said he'd been having behavioral problems, acting out. But Elena insists that wasn't like Tommy at all. He was quiet, studious, never caused trouble." Marcus leaned forward, studying the photo. "What does she want you to do?" Sarah picked up the letter, written in careful English with occasional Spanish phrases woven in. "She says she's tried everything: police, private investigators, even hired a lawyer who told her she was wasting her money chasing ghosts. But she won't give up. She believes something happened to her son at that school. And you believe her. I don't know yet. But here's what bothers me. I did some preliminary research. Sacred Heart has had 17 students reported as runaways in the past decade. 17, Marcus. That's not normal for a school with only 200 students." Marcus set down his coffee, his journalist instincts clearly engaged. 17 kids just disappeared? According to official records, yes. All listed as voluntary departures or runaways. No follow-up investigations that I can find in the public records. Sarah opened her laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet she'd been working on. "I started digging deeper after Elena's letter arrived. These aren't just recent cases." The spreadsheet showed names, dates, ages, a clinical representation of young lives that had simply vanished. Sarah had color-coded entries by decade, and the pattern was disturbing. "Jesus," Marcus whispered, scanning the data. "How far back does this go?" "I've found documented cases going back to 1985. That's as far as I could trace with digital records. But Marcus, if this pattern holds..." She pulled up a calculator on her phone. "We could be looking at dozens of missing children over the past 25 years. The newsroom hummed around them with the familiar sounds of deadline pressure. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the occasional frustrated curse from a reporter wrestling with a difficult source. But their corner felt suddenly isolated, as if the weight of what they were discussing had created a bubble of silence. "What's your gut telling you?" Marcus asked quietly. Sarah looked at Tommy's photograph again. Elena had written on the back in careful script, "Mi hijo era mi vida entera. He was my whole life. Please help me find the truth." My gut says Elena Chun is right to be scared. And if she's right about her son, then we need to find out what really happened to those other kids. Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay. But Sarah, if you're going to pursue this, you need to be careful. We're talking about a Catholic institution with deep community ties. They'll have resources, connections, lawyers. And if there's something to hide, they'll fight hard to keep it hidden," Sarah finished. "I know. But Marcus, what if Tommy Chun is still alive somewhere? What if some of these other kids are too? And what if they're not?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Sarah had covered missing persons cases before, had seen how quickly hope could turn to heartbreak. But she'd also seen what happened when institutions were allowed to operate without scrutiny, when people in positions of trust abused that trust. "Then their families deserve to know what happened," she said finally. "They deserve justice." Marcus stood up, decision made. "All right, but I want you to be methodical about this. Start with the recent cases, work backward. Build relationships with the families. They'll be your best sources." "And Sarah?" "Yeah, document everything. If this is what it looks like, we're going to need ironclad evidence. The kind that can stand up in court." As Marcus walked away, Sarah looked once more at Tommy Chin's photograph. Somewhere, Elena Chun was probably staring at this same image, wondering if her son was alive, if he was safe, if he would ever come home. Sarah picked up her phone and dialed the number written at the bottom of Elena's letter. It rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, tentative and hopeful. Elena? This is Sarah Mitchell from the Columbus Dispatch. I received your letter about Tommy. The sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line told Sarah everything she needed to know. Elena Chun had been waiting for this call for 2 years, and now, finally, someone was ready to listen. The drive to Millfield took Sarah through the rolling hills of southeastern Ohio, where autumn had painted the landscape in brilliant reds and golds. Sacred Heart Boarding School sat on a pristine 200-acre campus, its Gothic revival buildings rising from manicured lawns like something from a postcard. But as Sarah parked her Honda Civic near the visitor center, she couldn't shake the feeling that the beauty was somehow superficial, a carefully maintained facade. She had spent the past week following up on Elena's letter, and the conversation had been both heartbreaking and illuminating. Elena worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, to pay Tommy's tuition at Sacred Heart. She had believed the school would give her son opportunities she couldn't provide. He was so proud when he got accepted. Elena had told her over coffee at a small diner in Columbus. He showed me the brochure every day for a week. Mommy, look at the library. Look at the science labs. He thought it was his chance to become someone important. Now Sarah stood before those same impressive buildings Elena had shown her son, trying to reconcile the gleaming exterior with the growing list of missing students she'd compiled. Her research had expanded her initial count. She was now tracking 23 disappearances over the past decade alone. Ms. Mitchell? I'm Father William Kowalski, the headmaster. Sarah turned to find a tall, silver-haired man in clerical collar approaching with a practiced smile. His handshake was firm, his manner professionally warm, but his eyes held a wariness that immediately put her on alert. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Father, Sarah said, pulling out her notebook. As I mentioned on the phone, I'm researching student safety at boarding schools across Ohio. Of course, we're always happy to discuss our commitment to our students' well-being. Perhaps we could talk in my office? Father Kowalski's office was a study in understated authority, dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, religious artifacts, carefully arranged to convey both piety and scholarship. A photograph on his desk showed him shaking hands with the state governor. Sacred Heart has been serving Ohio families for nearly 50 years, he began, settling behind his desk. We're proud of our academic record and our tradition of shaping young minds according to Catholic values. I'm sure you are, Sarah said carefully. But I'm particularly interested in your policies regarding students who leave the school unexpectedly. Your runaway protocols, for instance. Something flickered across Father Kowalski's face, so brief Sarah almost missed it. Well, naturally, any boarding school faces challenges with homesick students. Adolescents can be impulsive. According to state records, Sacred Heart has reported 17 students as runaways in the past 10 years. That seems unusually high for a school of your size. I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers, Father Kowalski said, his tone cooling slightly. But you have to understand the population we serve. Many of our students come from difficult circumstances, broken homes, behavioral issues. Sometimes they simply can't adjust to our structured environment. Sarah made a note, watching his body language. Can you tell me about Tommy Chin? The change was immediate. Father Kowalski's shoulders tensed, and he reached for a water glass. That wasn't there. I'm afraid I can't discuss individual students without proper authorization from their families. Privacy laws, you understand. His mother has given me permission to investigate his disappearance, Sarah said, producing the signed release Elena had provided. She's very concerned about what happened to her son. Father Kowalski barely glanced at the document. Tommy was a troubled young man who made the unfortunate decision to run away. We reported it to the proper authorities immediately. Beyond that, there's nothing more to discuss. Mrs. Chin says Tommy called her the night before he disappeared. He was upset, frightened. What might have scared him? Ms. Mitchell, Father Kowalski said, standing abruptly. I think this conversation has run its course. If you have concerns about specific students, I'd suggest you speak with the police. Sarah remained seated. I plan to. But first, I'd like to understand why so many students have left Sacred Heart under mysterious circumstances. Parents like Elena Chun deserve answers. There's nothing mysterious about troubled teenagers making poor choices, Father Kowalski said, moving toward the door. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful, but I have other appointments. As Sarah was escorted to the parking lot, she noticed a young maintenance worker watching from near the dining hall. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before. She caught something in his expression, fear, or maybe recognition. She made a mental note of his location and walked slowly to her car, giving him time to approach if he chose. As she fumbled with her keys, she heard footsteps behind her. "Excuse me," came a quiet voice. "You're the reporter asking about missing kids?" Sarah turned to find the maintenance worker, a Hispanic man in his 30s with calloused hands and worried eyes. His name tag read Miguel. "Yes," she said carefully. "Sarah Mitchell, are you?" "I can't talk here," Miguel said, glancing nervously toward the administration building. "But if you want to know about the kids who disappeared, meet me at Rosie's Diner on Highway 33 tonight at 8. Come alone." Before Sarah could respond, he was walking away, disappearing around the corner of the building. Sarah got in her car, her heart racing. This was how sources were made. In parking lots and shadows, with whispered conversations and fearful glances, she drove away from Sacred Heart. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Elena Chen's number. "Sarah? I just got a call from someone at the school. They said you were there asking questions about Tommy." "That's right. I met with the headmaster." "Elena, who called you?" "He didn't give his name. But he said I should tell you to stop looking into things that don't concern you. That it wouldn't bring Tommy back and might cause trouble for other families." Sarah pulled over to the side of the road. "Elena, are you okay? Do you feel safe?" "I don't know," Elena whispered. "Sarah, what if they're right? What if I'm just making things worse?" "Elena, listen to me. You're not making anything worse. You're trying to find your son. That's what any mother would do. But what if? What if Tommy really did run away? What if he didn't want to come home?" Sarah heard the pain in Elena's voice, the doubt that had been planted by years of being told she was wrong, that she was imagining things, that she should just accept her loss and move on. "Do you believe that?" Sarah asked gently. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then, so quietly Sarah almost couldn't hear, "No. My Tommy would never leave without saying goodbye. He would never put me through this pain." "Then we keep looking. But Elena, if anyone else contacts you, anyone at all, I want you to call me immediately. And maybe you should stay with family for a few days." After Elena hung up, Sarah sat in her car as evening fell around her, watching the lights come on in the small towns dotting the Ohio countryside. Somewhere out there, 23 families were living with the same pain as Elena Chun. And tomorrow night, she might finally start getting some answers. But first, she had to survive her meeting with Miguel. Rosie's Diner sat at the intersection of two forgotten highways, the kind of place where truckers grab coffee at 3 a.m. and locals gathered to discuss high school football. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a booth near the back, where she could watch both the entrance and the kitchen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light that made the red vinyl seats look like dried blood. Miguel appeared exactly at 8, sliding into the booth across from her with the nervous energy of a man who'd spent the day second-guessing his decision to reach out. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, signaling the waitress for coffee. "I know this can't be easy." Miguel's hands shook slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee mug. "I've been working at Sacred Heart for 12 years, he said quietly. "I've seen things that keep me awake at night." "What kind of things?" "The kids who disappear, they don't just run away." Miguel glanced around the nearly empty diner. "I know because I'm the one who cleans up after." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean? Clean up after?" "Blood," Miguel said simply. "Not always, but sometimes. In the dormitory rooms. In the basement areas students aren't supposed to go. And then the next day, we're told the kid ran away in the night." The waitress approached to refill their coffee, and Miguel fell silent until she moved away. Sarah forced herself to remain calm, to let him tell his story at his own pace. "There's this room," Miguel continued, "in the basement of Mercy Hall. That's the old building, been there since the school opened. Students call it the reflection room, but we janitors, we call it something else." "What do you call it?" "The quiet room." Miguel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because kids go in there to think about what they've done wrong, and sometimes they come out different, quieter, scared. Sarah made notes, her reporter's instincts warring with a growing sense of dread. Miguel, have you ever reported what you've seen to police? You think I haven't tried? Miguel's laugh was bitter. 5 years ago, I called the county sheriff about a boy named David Reyes. 15 years old, sweet kid from Dayton. I found blood on his pillow, blood on the walls of his room. When I asked where David was, they told me he'd run away. What happened when you called the sheriff? Sheriff Morrison came out the next day, talked to Father Kowalski for maybe 20 minutes. Then he found me and told me I was mistaken about what I'd seen. Said if I kept spreading rumors, I'd lose my job and probably face charges for making false reports. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening. Sheriff Morrison is still in office, elected 5 times running. His daughter graduated from Sacred Heart. His son-in-law is on the school's board of trustees. The connections were becoming clearer, and Sarah didn't like the picture they painted. Miguel, can you tell me about the night Tommy Chin disappeared? Miguel's entire body tensed. You sure you want to know this? Because once I tell you, you can't unknow it. I'm sure. Miguel took a long sip of coffee, gathering himself. Tommy was in the reflection room that day. I saw him being taken there after dinner by Brother Marcus. Brother Marcus, he's the one they call when students need special attention. What kind of special attention? The kind that leaves marks. The kind that breaks something inside kids. Miguel's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. I was cleaning the hallway around 10 that night when I heard Tommy screaming. Not yelling, not crying, screaming like someone was killing him. Sarah's pen stilled on her notepad. What did you do? What could I do? I'm just the janitor. I went home and tried to forget what I heard. Miguel's eyes filled with tears. But the next morning, Tommy was gone. And there was blood on the doorframe of the reflection room. Did you take photos? With what? They don't let us have phones during work hours. And even if I had, who would believe the word of a maintenance worker against priests and brothers? Sarah reached across the table and touched Miguel's hand gently. I believe you. And I'm going to help make sure people know what happened to Tommy and the other children. There's more, Miguel said, pulling his hand away. The records. What records? Every month, Father Kowalski has me clean out his file cabinets, shred old documents, make room for new ones. But sometimes papers fall behind the cabinet and up under his desk. I've seen files on kids who supposedly ran away, but the files, they don't match the story. Sarah leaned forward. What do you mean? Medical records showing injuries that happened right before they disappeared. Psychological evaluations talking about severe trauma responses and concerning behavioral changes. These aren't files on kids who ran away. These are files on kids who were hurt bad enough to need serious help. Do you still have access to these files? Miguel shook his head. Too risky. But I know someone who might help. There's a teacher there, Miss Patricia Hoffman. She's been at Sacred Heart for 8 years, teaches English. She's seen things too, and I think she's been keeping her own records. Would she talk to me? Maybe, but not at the school. She's as scared as the rest of us. Miguel pulled out a napkin and wrote down a phone number. Tell her Miguel sent you, and tell her you know about the reflection room. As Miguel prepared to leave, Sarah had one more question. Miguel, how many children do you think have really disappeared from Sacred Heart? Miguel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. In my 12 years there, I've personally cleaned up after at least 30 runaways. But the school's been operating since 1962. If this has been going on the whole time. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Sarah did the math in her head. If the pattern held consistent over nearly 50 years, they could be looking at hundreds of missing children. Sarah, Miguel said as he stood to leave, be careful who you trust. This thing, it goes deep. Deeper than just the school. And there are people who will do anything to keep it buried. After Miguel left, Sarah sat alone in the diner, staring at the phone number he'd given her. Outside, the Ohio countryside stretched into darkness, hiding secrets that had been buried for decades. But now, finally, someone was ready to dig them up. She paid for the coffee and walked to her car, her mind already racing ahead to her next conversation. Patricia Hoffman might be the key to unlocking not just Tommy Chin's disappearance, But the systematic cover-up that had allowed Sacred Heart to operate with impunity for so long. As she drove back toward Columbus, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or join them. Sarah pulled over and stared at the message, her hands shaking slightly. Then she deleted it, put her phone on silent, and continued driving. Some threats were meant to scare you away from the truth, but Sarah Mitchell had never been easily scared. Patricia Hoffman lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Millfield, the kind of neighborhood where teachers and shop foremen raised their families in quiet respectability. When Sarah knocked on her door the following evening, she was greeted by a woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair and eyes that held the weight of too many secrets. Ms. Mitchell. Patricia's voice was careful, controlled. Miguel said you might call. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Sarah said, following Patricia into a living room that felt more like a fortress. Curtains drawn tight, no windows facing the street. I know this isn't easy. Patricia offered coffee, and they settled into chairs that had been positioned to avoid the front windows. Sarah noticed immediately that this was a woman who had learned to live with fear. Miguel told you about the reflection room, Patricia said without preamble. What else do you know? I know that 23 students have been reported as runaways from Sacred Heart in the past 10 years alone. I know that Tommy Chen called his mother terrified the night before he disappeared. And I know that people who ask questions about Sacred Heart tend to get threatened. Patricia's laugh was hollow. Threatened? Yes, that's one word for it. She stood and moved to a bookshelf, retrieving a thick manila folder hidden behind a row of Shakespeare plays. I've been documenting everything for 5 years. Every student who's disappeared, every injury that was explained away, every family that was told to move on for their own good. She handed the folder to Sarah, who opened it to find meticulous records, photocopied student files, handwritten notes, even some photographs. The scope of what Patricia had collected was staggering. Why? Sarah asked. Why risk everything to document this? Because someone has to. Patricia sat back down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I came to Sacred Heart thinking I could make a difference, teach these kids, help them find their voices. Instead, I watched them disappear one by one. Sarah studied the first file, a girl named Maria Santos who had vanished in 2007. According to Patricia's notes, Maria had been showing signs of severe anxiety and had confided to Patricia about special lessons with Brother Marcus. Tell me about Brother Marcus, Sarah said. Patricia's face darkened. Brother Marcus Thorne. He's been at Sacred Heart since 1980. Officially, he's the disciplinary coordinator. Unofficially, he's Father Kowalski's enforcer. When students step out of line, they go to Brother Marcus for counseling. What kind of counseling? The kind that leaves physical and psychological scars. I've seen students come back from sessions with him completely changed, withdrawn, fearful, sometimes with unexplained injuries. Patricia pulled out a photograph from the folder. This is Jessica Walsh. Bright girl, wanted to be a writer. After 3 sessions with Brother Marcus, she stopped speaking entirely. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Sarah examined the photo. A smiling blonde girl with intelligent eyes. According to the file, Jessica had been reported as a runaway, but her parents had never stopped looking for her. Patricia, have you tried to contact these families directly? I tried with Jessica's parents. I called them, told them what I'd witnessed. The next day, I was called into Father Kowalski's office and given a choice: sign a non-disclosure agreement and keep my job, or be terminated for unprofessional conduct and face lawsuits for slander. You signed. I signed. But I also started keeping better records. Patricia's voice grew stronger. I figured if I could document everything someday, someone would listen. Someone like you. They spent the next 2 hours going through Patricia's files. The pattern was always the same. Students showing signs of distress, sessions with Brother Marcus, increasing withdrawal from peers and activities, and then sudden disappearance. The reflection room, Sarah said finally. Miguel mentioned it specifically. Patricia went very still. The reflection room is in the basement of Mercy Hall. It's soundproofed, officially for meditation and prayer. But I've heard things. Screaming, pleading. And I've seen students go down there and never come back up. Never. Not alive. Patricia's voice was barely audible. Sarah, I think Brother Marcus has been killing these children. And I think the school administration has been covering it up for decades. The weight of the accusation settled between them like a physical presence. Sarah had suspected abuse, cover-ups, maybe even negligent homicide. But premeditated murder. On this scale, that's a serious allegation, Sarah said carefully. Do you have any direct evidence? Patricia stood and walked to another bookshelf, this one in the hallway. She returned with a small digital recorder. 3 months ago, I started, staying late at school, trying to catch some evidence. This is from a night in September. She pressed play. The recording was faint but clear enough. Footsteps on concrete, a door opening with a rusty creak, and then voices. Father Kowalski's cultured tones were unmistakable. How many times do I have to tell you to be more careful? With the disposal? Another voice, rougher, presumably Brother Marcus. The boy fought harder than expected. Left more evidence. This can't happen again. We have inspectors coming next month. It won't. I've got better methods now. Good. And Marcus? Make sure the janitor doesn't ask any more questions. Miguel's been getting too curious lately. The recording ended. Sarah stared at the device, her mind reeling. It wasn't a confession to murder, but it was clearly a discussion about covering up something serious, something that involved disposal and evidence. My God, Sarah whispered. There's more, Patricia said. I've been tracking the timeline, cross-referencing student disappearances with other events. Sarah, these kids don't just vanish randomly. There's a pattern. She pulled out a calendar marked with red X's. Look at the dates. Every disappearance happens within a week of either a state inspection, a visiting family member, or some other external scrutiny. It's like they're cleaning house. Sarah studied the calendar, her reporter's mind working through the implications. They're eliminating witnesses, students who might talk to inspectors or family members. That's what I think. And Sarah, there's something else. Something that's been keeping me awake for months. What? Patricia met her eyes directly. I think I'm next. My contract is up for renewal in December, but I've been told it's unlikely to be extended. They're pushing me out, and I'm scared that once I'm no longer employed by the school, she didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. Patricia had seen too much, knew too much. She was no longer just a witness. She was a liability. Patricia, you can't stay here. You need to disappear until we can get this story published and get law enforcement involved. I can't just leave. I have a mortgage, responsibilities, you'll have a grave if you stay. Sarah's voice was harsh, but necessary. These people have been killing children for decades. What makes you think they'll hesitate to kill a teacher who threatens to expose them? Patricia stared at her hands, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. What do you need from me? Everything. All your files, the recording, any other evidence you have. And I need you to go somewhere safe while I put this story together. I have a sister in California. I could visit for a few weeks. Do it. Tonight. Don't pack much. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Just leave. As Patricia began gathering her documentation, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Elena Chen's number. Elena? What's wrong? Sarah, someone broke into my apartment. Elena's voice was shaking. They didn't take anything, but they left a message on my mirror, written in what looked like blood. What did it say? Stop looking or join Tommy. Elena started crying. Sarah, I'm so scared. What if they hurt me? What if they already hurt Tommy? Sarah looked at Patricia, who had frozen in the act of stuffing papers into a suitcase. Both women were in danger now, and Sarah realized she might be next. Elena, pack a bag right now. Go to your sister in Cleveland, the one you told me about. Don't use your credit cards. Don't use your phone except to call me. And Elena, yes, we're going to find Tommy. And we're going to make sure everyone knows what happened to him and all the other children. But first, we have to stay alive long enough to tell the story. After Elena hung up, Sarah helped Patricia finish packing. As they prepared to leave, Patricia grabbed Sarah's arm. There's one more thing. Brother Marcus keeps a journal. I've seen him writing in it after his sessions with students. If you could find that journal, where does he keep it? His office, I think. Or maybe his room in the priest's quarters. But Sarah, getting to it would mean breaking into Sacred Heart. Sarah thought about the 302 souls. Her investigation had expanded to show disappearances going back to 1985 who had been erased from existence. She thought about Elena Chun, sleeping in her car somewhere on I-71 because she was afraid to go home. She thought about Patricia Hoffman, forced to abandon her life because she'd tried to protect children. Then I guess I'm breaking into Sacred Heart, Sarah said. The security guard at Sacred Heart worked alone on the night shift, making his rounds every 2 hours with the lazy confidence of a man who'd never encountered a real threat. Sarah had been watching from the tree line for 3 nights, timing his patrol pattern, noting which doors he checked and which he ignored. The priest's quarters were housed in Augustine Hall, a newer building connected to the main campus by covered walkways. Brother Marcus's room was on the 2nd floor. Patricia had provided a hand-drawn map based on her years at the school at 2:47 a.m. Sarah saw the guard's flashlight disappear around the corner of the library. She had exactly 43 minutes before he'd make it back to Augustine Hall. She moved quickly across the open ground, keeping to the shadows cast by the century-old oak trees that dotted the campus. The October night was cold and moonless, perfect conditions for breaking and entering. Sarah's hands shook as she approached the side door Patricia had told her about, a maintenance entrance that was often left unlocked because the lock had been broken for months. The door opened with barely a whisper. Sarah slipped inside, using her phone's flashlight to navigate the hallway. The priest's quarters felt different at night, not sacred, but somehow malevolent, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Brother Marcus's room was the 3rd door on the left. Sarah pressed her ear against it, listening for any sound of occupancy. Nothing. According to Patricia, Brother Marcus often worked late in his office, sometimes not returning to his room until dawn. The door was locked, but Sarah had come prepared. Years of investigating corrupt politicians had taught her some unconventional skills, including basic lock picking. The simple residential lock yielded after 2 minutes of careful work. Brother Marcus's room was spartanly furnished, a narrow bed, a wooden desk, a crucifix on the wall, and a bookshelf filled with religious texts. But Sarah wasn't interested in his theology. She moved directly to the desk, searching for the journal Patricia had mentioned. The top drawer contained office supplies and correspondence. The 2nd drawer held financial records, nothing unusual. But the bottom drawer was locked, and when Sarah picked it open, she found what she was looking for. The journal was leather-bound and thick, filled with entries dating back 15 years. Sarah opened it randomly and immediately felt sick. March 15, 2008. David showed excessive defiance during evening prayer. Required extended correction in the reflection room. Applied pressure to carotid until compliance achieved. Subject showed appropriate fear response. March 22, 2008. David continues to resist discipline. Father K suggests permanent solution may be necessary. Agreed to proceed if subject does not improve by month's end. March 28, 2008. David attempted to contact family. Intervention required. Subject proved more fragile than anticipated. Disposal handled by groundskeeping staff. Reported as runaway. Sarah photographed page after page with her phone, her hands shaking as the full scope of the horror became clear. This wasn't just abuse. It was systematic murder, documented with clinical precision. The entries stretched back years, detailing the deaths of dozens of children. Names Sarah recognized from Patricia's files, from her own research, from the heartbroken families who still hoped their children might come home someday. September 12, 2009. New subject, Thomas Chun, showing problematic attachment to family. Mother's phone calls increasing subject's emotional instability. Will begin correction protocol immediately. September 15, 2009. Thomas responding poorly to standard discipline. Increased pressure authorized by Father K. Subject unconscious. For extended period but revived. September 18, 2009. Thomas attempted communication with mother despite explicit prohibition. Described school conditions in concerning detail. Permanent solution approved. September 19, 2009. Thomas Chun disposed of. Body weight required additional measures for complete dissolution. Groundskeeping staff instructed on improved Lyme treatment. Sarah had to stop reading for a moment, overwhelmed by nausea and rage. Tommy Chun, Elena's beloved son who wanted to become someone important, had been murdered and dissolved in lime like he was nothing more than waste to be disposed of. She forced herself to continue photographing, knowing that every page represented evidence that could finally bring justice to the families who had been silenced and ignored for decades. The journal contained detailed descriptions of murder methods, disposal techniques, and the systematic cover-up that had allowed it to continue. May 3, 2006. Sheriff Morrison confirms cooperation will continue. Annual donation to campaign fund increased to $25,000. District attorney also requires attention. His son begins enrollment next fall. August 14, 2007. State Inspector Phillips proving problematic. Recommends involving subject in accident during next scheduled visit. Arrangements made with groundskeeping staff. November 30th, 2010. Media inquiry from Columbus paper regarding missing students. Father K handling through diocese connections. Reporter's editor to be contacted directly. The corruption went far beyond Sacred Heart itself. Law enforcement, politicians, even the media. Brother Marcus's journal detailed a network of complicity that had protected the school's killing operation for decades. Sarah was photographing the final entries when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her blood froze as she realized she'd lost track of time. The security guard's rounds had taken him back to Augustine Hall earlier than expected. The footsteps stopped outside Brother Marcus's door. Sarah held her breath, praying he would continue his patrol without checking the room. The doorknob turned slowly. Sarah dove behind the bed just as the door opened. Light from a flashlight swept across the room, lingering on the desk where she'd been standing moments before. Had she left anything out of place? She couldn't remember if she'd closed the journal or returned it to the drawer. The light moved methodically around the room, and Sarah pressed herself against the wall, trying to become invisible. Her phone was still in her hand, containing the photographic evidence that could destroy Sacred Heart's operation. But if she was caught here, that evidence might never see daylight. The flashlight beam passed over the bed, missing her by inches. Sarah could hear the guard's breathing, could smell the coffee on his breath. He was looking for something specific. This wasn't a routine check. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the footsteps retreated. Sarah waited until she heard the outside door close before emerging from her hiding place. The journal was still on the desk, open to the page she'd been photographing. She quickly took the remaining photos and returned it to the locked drawer. As she prepared to leave, Sarah noticed something else. A filing cabinet she hadn't examined. Using her lock picks one more time, she opened it to find hanging folders labeled with years: 1985, 1990, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010. Each folder contained dozens of student files. Sarah pulled out the 1985 folder and found herself looking at the beginning of Sacred Heart's systematic killing operation. The first victim was a boy named Michael Torres, just 14 years old. His file contained a death certificate, not a missing person report, but an actual death certificate listing cause of death as accidental drowning during school camping trip. But Brother Marcus's handwritten notes told a different story. Subject became increasingly unstable after witnessing disciplinary action against roommate. Attempted to contact family with detailed account of correction procedures. Permanent solution implemented during outdoor education program. Body recovered from lake appears consistent with drowning accident. Sarah photographed the files from each decade, documenting the evolution of Sacred Heart's murder operation. In the early years, they had been less sophisticated. Deaths were disguised as accidents or suicides. But as time went on, they'd refined their methods, simply reporting victims as runaways rather than staging elaborate death scenes. The scope was staggering. Sarah's rough count suggested that over 300 children had been murdered at Sacred Heart over a 25-year period. Not missing, murdered. She was photographing the last file when her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again. Still in Augustine Hall? You should leave. Now. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Someone was watching her, knew exactly where she was. She quickly closed the filing cabinet and moved toward the door, but as she reached for the handle, she heard voices in the hallway. Told you someone was in his room. The journal was moved. Impossible. No one has access. Well, someone does. And if they've seen what's in there, Sarah recognized both voices, Father Kowalski and Brother Marcus. They were coming back, probably to move or destroy the evidence she'd just photographed. The window. Sarah rushed to Brother Marcus's window, which faced the back of the building. It was a 15-foot drop to the ground, but the alternative was being caught by two men who had murdered children for decades. As the voices grew closer, Sarah opened the window and climbed out, hanging by her fingertips before dropping into the bushes below. She landed hard, pain shooting through her ankle, but she forced herself to move toward the tree line. Behind her, lights came on in Brother Marcus's room. She heard shouting, the sound of furniture being moved, drawers slamming. They knew someone had been there, but they didn't know who or what had been taken. Sarah limped through the darkness toward her car, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The photographs she'd taken represented evidence of the largest serial killing operation in Ohio's history. But more than that, they represented justice for 302 children who had been erased from existence, whose families had been told to forget and move on. As she reached her car, Sarah's phone rang. Marcus Rivera's number. Sarah? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Marcus, I've got it. I've got everything. Evidence of systematic murder going back 25 years. Sarah, listen to me. You need to get out of there right now. I got a call tonight from someone claiming to represent Sacred Heart's legal counsel. They know you're investigating, and they're not planning to let you publish. What do you mean? I mean, they've already contacted our publisher, threatened lawsuits, claimed you're mentally unstable, said you've been making threats against school officials. Sarah, they're trying to destroy your credibility before you can even tell the story. Sarah started her car, her mind racing. They had anticipated her investigation, had prepared countermeasures, but they hadn't anticipated the physical evidence she now possessed. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Contact the FBI directly, not local law enforcement. Tell them we have evidence of interstate crimes involving missing children. And Marcus? Yeah. If something happens to me, make sure Elena Chun knows we found Tommy. Make sure she knows what really happened to her son. Sarah, nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to break this story, and we're going to get justice for these families. As Sarah drove away from Sacred Heart, she looked in her rearview mirror and saw lights throughout the campus beginning to turn on. Soon, Father Kowalski and Brother Marcus would realize the scope of what had been taken from Brother Marcus's room. The race was on. Sarah had the evidence to destroy them, but they had the power and connections to destroy her first. Everything would depend on who could move faster. The predators who had been protected by silence and corruption for decades, or the reporter who refused to let 302 murdered children remain forgotten. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. It showed a much younger Marcus with a teenage boy who shared his features. My son Roberto. He died in a car accident 15 years ago, remember? Sarah nodded. Marcus had taken weeks off for the funeral, had never really been the same afterward. He didn't die in a car accident. He took his own life. Left a note saying he couldn't live with what had happened to him at Sacred Heart. The pieces clicked into place. Roberto was a student there. For 2 years. He never told me what happened, but after he died, I found journals, sketches. They did things to him. Sarah? Terrible things. And I never investigated because I was too broken to think clearly. Marcus, they know I've been covering for them for 15 years. If I help you publish this story, they'll release Roberto's journals, his suicide note, evidence that I've been complicit in covering up crimes against children. My reputation, my legacy, everything I've built, it'll all be destroyed. Sarah felt her heart break for her friend and mentor. Sacred Heart had trapped him in their web of corruption and silence, using his dead son as leverage to ensure his cooperation. So what do we do? She asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But Sarah, you have to understand, they won't just destroy our careers. They'll destroy us. Completely. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Torres. Need to meet urgently. Something's happened. I have to go, Sarah told Marcus. But think about this. If we don't stop them now, how many more children will disappear? How many more families will suffer what Elena Chun has suffered? As Sarah left the dispatch building, she realized she was now completely alone. The FBI was her only ally, and she prayed they could move fast enough to prevent Sacred Heart from destroying the evidence and silencing the witnesses forever. Her phone rang as she started her car. Unknown number. Hello, Ms. Mitchell. The voice was cultured, familiar. Father Kowalski. I believe it's time you and I had a conversation. The FBI field office in Cleveland at 6 a.m. was a study in controlled chaos. Agent Rebecca Torres, no relation to Michael Torres, the first victim Sarah had discovered, though the coincidence wasn't lost on either of them, had been working federal crimes against children for 12 years. She'd seen cases that would haunt most people forever, but nothing had prepared her for what Sarah Mitchell had brought to her office. 302 victims, Agent Torres said, scrolling through the photographs on Sarah's phone. Over 25 years. And you're telling me local law enforcement was complicit? According to Brother Marcus's journal, Sheriff Morrison has been on Sacred Heart's payroll since at least 2006, Sarah confirmed, along with the district attorney and several state officials. The corruption goes deep. Agent Torres had called in her partner, Agent David Kim, and the federal prosecutor assigned to crimes against children, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh. The small conference room felt cramped with the weight of the evidence spread across the table. The problem, AUSA Walsh said, is that most of this evidence was obtained illegally. Breaking and entering, theft of private documents. Defense attorneys will have a field day. But the photographs document actual crimes, Sarah argued. Murder, conspiracy, corruption of public officials. Surely that overrides. It's not that simple, Agent Torres interrupted gently. We can use your photographs to guide our investigation, but we'll need to find legal ways to obtain the same evidence. Search warrants, subpoenas, witness testimony. Agent Kim looked up from the journal photographs he'd been studying. The good news is that some of these families might be willing to cooperate now that they know what really happened to their children. Elena Chun, for instance. Elena's already agreed to help however she can, Sarah said. And Patricia Hoffman, the teacher, has years of documentation from her time at the school. Where is Ms. Hoffman now? Agent Torres asked. Safe house in California. But she's ready to return if you can guarantee her protection. The four of them spent the next several hours developing an action plan. Federal agents would begin immediate surveillance of Sacred Heart while prosecutors prepared search warrants. Patricia would be brought back under federal protection to provide testimony. Most importantly, they would reach out to families of the disappeared children to build witness testimony. How long before you can move? Sarah asked. Search warrants will take 48 hours minimum, AUSA Walsh replied. But we're treating this as an ongoing threat to children, so we'll expedite everything possible. What about Sacred Heart's connections? If Sheriff Morrison tips them off, we're not involving local law enforcement, Agent Torres assured her. This will be federal agents only, and we'll move fast once we have our warrants. As Sarah prepared to leave the FBI office, Agent Kim pulled her aside. Ms. Mitchell, you need to understand that you're in significant danger now. These people have killed children for decades. They won't hesitate to kill a reporter who threatens to expose them. I've thought about that. But these families deserve justice. Elena Chin deserves to know what happened to Tommy. I understand. But please, be careful who you trust. If Sacred Heart has corrupted local law enforcement, they might have sources. In other places too. Sarah drove back toward Columbus with Agent Kim's warning echoing in her mind. She'd been so focused on gathering evidence that she hadn't fully considered the personal danger she was in. But it was too late to back down now. Her phone rang as she reached the outskirts of the city. Marcus Rivera's name appeared on the screen. Sarah, where are you? I need you to come to the office immediately. Marcus, I just came from the FBI. They're going to. Sarah, just come in. Now, we need to talk. Something in Marcus's tone made her uneasy, but she couldn't quite identify what. After 20 years of working together, she knew his voice better than her own father's. This wasn't his normal stress response to a big story. The Columbus Dispatch. Building seemed unusually quiet when Sarah arrived. The parking lot was nearly empty, which was strange for a Tuesday morning. She found Marcus in his office, but he wasn't alone. Two men in expensive suits stood near the window, the kind of lawyers who specialized in making problems disappear. Marcus looked uncomfortable, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Sarah, Marcus said carefully. These gentlemen are from Sacred Heart's legal counsel. They'd like to discuss your recent activities. The taller lawyer, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, I'm attorney Douglas Brennan. My client is prepared to offer you a very generous settlement in exchange for your agreement to cease your current investigation. Settlement for what? Sarah asked, though she was already moving toward the door. Something was very wrong here. For the damage you've done to Sacred Heart's reputation through your reckless and false allegations, Brennan replied smoothly. We're prepared to offer $500,000 for your signature on a non-disclosure agreement. And if I refuse, the second lawyer, younger but somehow more menacing, spoke for the first time. Then we'll be forced to pursue legal remedies for defamation, harassment, breaking and entering, and theft. We have security footage of your illegal entry into school property last night. Sarah felt the trap closing around her. They'd been watching, recording, preparing for this moment. But she also realized something else. They were scared. You don't offer $500,000 to silence someone unless they have something devastating to hide. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, what did they offer you? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah, maybe you should consider their offer. This story, it's dangerous. For all of us. What did they offer you? She repeated. A position as communications director for the diocese, Marcus admitted. $100,000 a year, full benefits. Sarah, they made it clear that if we don't cooperate, the Dispatch will face lawsuits that could destroy the paper. Sarah understood now. Sacred Heart's corruption wasn't limited to law enforcement. They had resources, connections, influence. Throughout Ohio's power structure, they could make newspapers fold, careers disappear, lives become very difficult for anyone who opposed them. Gentlemen, Sarah said, addressing the lawyers directly, I need time to consider your offer. Of course, Brennan replied. But we'll need your answer by tomorrow evening. After that, our offer expires and we pursue other remedies. As the lawyers left, Sarah remained in Marcus's office, staring at the man who had been her mentor for 2 decades. 20 years, Marcus. 20 years we've been chasing truth together. And you're willing to sell out for a job with the Catholic Church. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure they can bring to bear. They own judges, prosecutors, politicians. They can destroy us. They've already destroyed 302 children. Sarah's voice rose. Elena Chen's son was dissolved in lime, Marcus. A 16-year-old boy who just wanted to make his mother proud. Marcus flinched, but didn't back down. And publishing this story won't bring Tommy back. It'll just destroy more lives, yours, mine, everyone who works at this paper. Sarah realized she was looking at a stranger. The Marcus Rivera she'd known would never have backed down from a story this important, no matter what threats were made. They got to you, she said quietly. Before they ever made the offer, they found something to hold over your head. Marcus's face went pale. Sarah, please, just take the money and walk away. Write freelance, start a blog, whatever. But don't destroy yourself over this. What do they have on you, Marcus? It doesn't matter. It does to me. The meeting place Father Kowalski chose was fitting in its irony. The Cathedral of St. Joseph in downtown Columbus, where light filtered through stained glass windows depicting scenes of salvation and redemption. Sarah arrived first, choosing a pew near the back where she could watch the entrances while appearing to pray. Father Kowalski entered through the side door, his clerical collar pristine white against his black cassock. He moved with the confidence of a man who had spent decades manipulating people through their faith and fear. But as he approached Sarah's pew, she noticed something different in his demeanor, a wariness that suggested he finally understood the magnitude of what was crashing down around him. Ms. Mitchell, he said, sliding into the pew beside her. Thank you for coming. Father, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I have to admit, I'm curious why you wanted to meet here. Seems like sacred ground might not be the best place for someone with your activities. Father Kowalski's smile was thin. I found that people are more reasonable when surrounded by reminders of divine judgment. It puts our earthly concerns in perspective. Divine judgment. Sarah turned to face him fully. Is that what you call what you've been doing to children for 25 years? What I've been doing, Father Kowalski said carefully, is running an institution that transforms troubled young people into productive members of society. Sometimes that transformation requires firm guidance. Tommy Chun, Maria Santos, Jessica Walsh, David Reyes. Sarah spoke each name like an accusation. Were they transformed, Father? Or were they murdered? For the first time, Father Kowalski's composure cracked slightly. You've been reading things you shouldn't have. Brother Marcus has always been too detailed in his record keeping. Those records document the systematic murder of 302 children. That's not record keeping. That's a confession to mass murder. Father Kowalski was quiet for a moment, staring at the crucifix above the altar. Do you have children? Ms. Mitchell? No. Then you cannot understand the burden of molding young souls. These weren't innocent children we're discussing. They were damaged goods, products of broken homes, abuse, neglect. Many of them were beyond redemption when they arrived at Sacred Heart. Sarah felt her anger rising. So you decided to kill them? I decided to prevent them from spreading their poison to others. You've seen our success stories, the students who graduated from Sacred Heart and went on to productive lives. 4. Every child we had to remove, we saved dozens of others from corruption. The casual way he spoke about murdering children made Sarah's skin crawl. And the families? Elena Chun still believes her son might come home someday. Mrs. Chun will heal in time. Grief passes. The alternative, allowing her son to corrupt other students, to spread his defiance and disrespect, would have caused far more suffering. His defiance? Tommy Chun was 16 years old and homesick. His crime was calling his mother. Father Kowalski turned to look at Sarah directly, and she saw something in his eyes that chilled her. Complete absence of remorse. This wasn't a man who had made terrible mistakes. This was a predator who believed absolutely in his right to decide who lived and died. Ms. Mitchell, you're an intelligent woman. You must understand that Sacred Heart provides a valuable service to society. We take the children no one else wants, the violent, the damaged, the hopeless, and we either fix them or we ensure they cannot harm others. That work is too important to be destroyed by misguided journalism. Is that why you killed State Inspector Phillips? Because he threatened your work? Father Kowalski's eyes narrowed. How much do you actually know? I know that Inspector Phillips was investigating Sacred Heart in 2007 when he died in a convenient accident. I know that you've been paying off Sheriff Morrison and the district attorney. I know that Brother Marcus has been your executioner. For decades, Brother Marcus is a man of faith who understands the necessity of difficult choices. Like myself, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, setting it on the pew between them. This conversation is being recorded, Father. Every word you've said is evidence that will be used to prosecute you for multiple counts of murder. Father. Kowalski glanced at the phone but didn't seem concerned. I'm afraid that won't be a problem, Ms. Mitchell. Why not? Because you won't be leaving this cathedral alive. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Sarah felt her heart rate spike as she realized the trap she'd walked into. Father Kowalski had chosen this location not for its irony, but for its isolation. The cathedral was empty except for them, and he clearly had no intention of letting her leave with evidence of his confession. You're going to kill me in a church. You're going to suffer a tragic accident. A fall down the cathedral steps, perhaps. Very sad. A young reporter under tremendous stress, driven to despair by the vicious lies being spread about a respected educational institution. Sarah stood slowly, calculating her distance to the nearest exit. Father Kowalski remained seated, but she noticed movement in the shadows near the altar. Brother Marcus emerged from behind a pillar, his bulk blocking the main aisle. Ms. Mitchell, Father Kowalski continued conversationally, you've caused us considerable trouble, but you've also provided an opportunity to clean house. Your friend Ms. Hoffman will suffer an unfortunate accident in California. Mrs. Chen's grief will overwhelm her. Even your editor, Mr. Rivera, may find himself unable to cope with the guilt of leading you down this destructive path. The FBI knows everything, Sarah said, backing toward the side exit. You can't kill all of us. The FBI knows what an unstable reporter claims to have discovered through illegal activities. When you're found dead and your evidence disappears, they'll conclude you fabricated everything in a desperate bid for attention. Brother Marcus was moving closer, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Sarah reached the side door and grabbed the handle, but it didn't turn. Locked. I'm afraid Brother Marcus secured the building before your arrival, Father Kowalski said, standing now. We can't have any interruptions. Sarah pulled out her phone and hit the speed dial for Agent Torres, praying the call would connect before Brother Marcus reached her. The phone rang once, twice. Brother Marcus's massive hand closed around her wrist, and the phone clattered to the floor. Sarah tried to scream, but his other hand clamped over her mouth. Make it look like an accident, Father Kowalski instructed. A fall from the choir loft should be sufficient. As Brother Marcus began dragging her toward the stairs leading to the upper level, Sarah heard the sound she'd been praying for. Her phone, still connected to Agent Torres's number, amplifying the conversation throughout the cathedral. Sarah? Sarah, are you there? I can hear voices. Father Kowalski dove for the phone, but it was too late. On the other end of the line, Agent Torres was already shouting orders to her team. Federal agents, moving to St. Joseph Cathedral immediately. Officers down, repeat. Officers down. Brother Marcus released Sarah and lunged for the altar, where Sarah now saw he'd hidden a pistol behind the candlesticks. But before he could reach it, the cathedral's main doors burst open and federal agents poured in, weapons drawn. FBI. Nobody moved. Father Kowalski raised his hands slowly, his face a mask of resignation. Brother Marcus, however, had reached his weapon and was turning toward the agents when Agent Torres's voice cut through the chaos. Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for the murders of Tommy Chun, David Reyes, Maria Santos, and approximately 300 other victims. Drop your weapon now. Brother Marcus hesitated for a moment that stretched like eternity. Then, perhaps realizing that his decades of killing children in the name of God had finally caught up with him, he placed the gun on the altar and raised his hands. The agents handcuffed both men. Agent Torres approached Sarah. Are you hurt? No, Sarah managed, though her hands were shaking. Did you hear everything? Enough. We've got full confessions to multiple murders, conspiracy, corruption of public officials. This is over. Father Kowalski, even in handcuffs, maintained his arrogant demeanor. You have no idea what you've done, he told Agent Torres. Sacred Heart provided a service that society needed. Those children were murdered. Agent Torres cut him off. And their families deserve justice. All 302 of them. As the federal agents led Father Kowalski and Brother Marcus away, Sarah remained in the cathedral, surrounded by the stained glass images of salvation. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe freely. Her phone rang. Elena, Chin's number. Sarah? I saw the news. They're saying you found Tommy. Yes, Elena. We found him. And we found everyone responsible for what happened to him. Elena's sobbing on the other end of the line was heartbreaking, but Sarah knew it was the beginning of healing rather than the continuation of torment. Can I finally bury my son? The FBI will help you recover Tommy's remains and all the other children. It's going to take time, but Elena, they're all coming home. 6 months later, Sarah stood in Millfield Cemetery watching Elena Chun place flowers on a headstone that finally bore her son's name. Sacred Heart Boarding School had been permanently closed, its building scheduled for demolition. Father Kowalski and Brother Marcus were awaiting trial on 302 counts of murder, along with dozens of counts of conspiracy and corruption. Sheriff Morrison had been arrested, along with the district attorney and 3 state officials. The corruption network that had protected Sacred Heart was systematically being dismantled. Most importantly, 302 families finally had answers. Not the answers they'd hoped for, but the truth they deserved. Thank you, Elena said as she stood beside Tommy's grave. Thank you for not giving up on him. I couldn't give up, Sarah replied. Tommy deserved someone to fight for him. They all did. As they walked away from the cemetery together, Sarah thought about the weight of silence and the power of truth. For 25 years, Sacred Heart had operated in darkness, protected by corruption and fear. But in the end, the voices of 302 murdered children had been heard, and they would never be silenced again.